This, ladies and gentlemen, well, just ladies because I see no gentlemen, we present personhood. For some reason, there we go. I am justice. And contrary to popular belief, I am not blind. I am just severely cross-eyed. As of this moment, you have entered a world that is very much like your own, except in one singular way. A law has been passed roughly 6 months ago. And it has quickly changed most of the nation. Some say that it is a great way to ensure the future of America. Others say it is horrible and roughly makes 50% of the population second-class citizens. This law is called the Personhood Statute, or Personhood for short, because it is very hard to say when drunk. Joining me today are Professor Sally Paulson, Esquire, and I am going to sit down now, and Professor sorry, I tongue-tied so horribly. Leslie Fadiga-Stewart from the Political Science Division of Delt State University. Today at this panel that I have convened, we will be discussing the concept of personhood. We will be doing so by incorporating scholarly presentations from these two wonderful ladies, along with a dramatic work written by A.M. Paulson. And now, I turn it over to Dr. Paulson. Tell us a little bit about what has been happening in Mississippi.
Well, Mississippi was one of the first states in the country after Colorado to try to pass the Personhood Amendment. And while that's often mentioned in passing in a lot of law journal articles and other publications, it is never clearly discussed why it is that the citizens in a state located in the Bible Belt of the Deep South decided to reject this amendment. And that's one of the things that this panel would like to go into more detail about.
So again, I'm keenly interested in this particular issue along with my colleague Dr. Paulson, because as a professor of political science I teach courses on gender and politics. And while this was going on, I was teaching a course on women, politics, and policy. And again, one of the things that you want to keep in mind is that, again, there's a lot of backdrop that goes on to what happened to Mississippi, and we want to really concentrate on the actual motivation behind the personhood amendments. So we're going to explore a little bit of the history, and I think what we're really also interested in is looking at some of the effects, the consequences of these personhood amendments that have been going on across the country. This can be summed up in several aspects. One, these amendments could have an impact on women's right to have an abortion, okay, without undue burden being placed on them by the state. The other thing is that the amendments have a broader effect on the relationship as established by the Supreme Court's landmark Roe v. Wade decision, and between a woman and her unborn fetus or child. Thirdly, the exact citizenship status as an unborn child might have some issues as well too, and there's the issue about how its rights might permit the state to regulate the everyday activities of a pregnant woman, and also it may establish criminal liability for a pregnant woman if she does not follow these regulations. And it also brings up the issue of whether these amendments and the laws based on them will meet their espoused claims. And so finally, what we hope to do today is that this panel really wants to place these personhood amendments really in a larger context by discussing the ongoing attempts to limit a woman's autonomy over her own body.
And Dr. Stewart, would you please explain a little bit on this PowerPoint slide, the Mississippi Y?
Right. Again, as we saw from the previous one, again, we started out with Initiative 26 in 2011, and we're going to wind up here where recently we're going to have Initiative 41 is not going to even be on the ballot, and I'll discuss that a little bit later. But starting with this one here, why Mississippi? I think, again, it comes back to a little bit what Dr. Paulson was talking about, that a lot of people thought this was going to be a shoo-in, particularly in a southern state in the buckle of the Bible Belt. And it had gotten a lot of national attention, okay? Rachel Maddow, New York Times were particularly discussing this particular issue. And so the limelight was really on Mississippi. And so there's some things that you wanted to think about here, that if the Mississippians voted on this particular issue, what were the implications going to be not only for the state but also at the national level? And so if it passed, 26 then would outlaw abortion in the state of Mississippi. It would also, because of the language, make cloning and other forms of medical cannibalism effectively stop that as well too. And it would effectively set up a challenge to, challenge Roe v. Wade. And so that's going to be particularly important. And as you can see from the next slide here, what you have here in 2011 is that you have two different petitioners from different parts of Mississippi who were trying to bring this initiative onto the ballot. Again, it was on the ballot in 2011. They're going to fail to get the requisite signatures for the 2014 ballot. But one of the things that you kind of want to keep in mind is that Initiative 26 is really going to define this, it's going to have this definition here of a person or persons that are going to be part of the Constitution, that are going to include every human being from the moment of fertilization. Okay. In contrast, what we're going to see a little bit here is that 41 is going to say that the right to life begins at conception, and that all human beings at every stage of development is going to be included there. And so as a result, those people, those persons are going to have an inalienable right as persons under the law. And then again, as you can see down here on the bottom part, this is the actual question that was on the ballot in 2011 and what they were proposing for the 2014 ballot as well too. So this is kind of what we want to look at. So again, here are some organizations that were opposed to Initiative 26. As you can see, we have a slew of organizations, from the ACLU to obstetricians and gynecologists, to again people who were part of a coalition for stem cell, and even those again related to reproductive technology, since it talked about this particular issue as well too. So I'll talk a little bit more about this particular initiative a little bit later on.
And for your convenience, considering the professors will also be interpreting other characters that are in the play, the playwright has graciously done some renderings, so you guys will know who is talking and the characters, so you don't lose track. Dr. Paulson, who not only has a PhD, but also a law degree, and is currently working on a book about school desegregation cases. I really hope that gets it done. After reading all of the law journal articles that have come out since this has failed to pass, would you explain a little about it?
Well, I think it goes directly back to the landmark 1973 Roe v. Wade decision. And in that decision, what you had was the court explicitly held that there was set up a trimester analysis grounded in the notion of viability. And basically said, for the first 3 months, a woman has an unfettered right to an abortion. Then we sort of get something in the middle, and then towards the late, then we might get the state interest. So it was definitely a balance. As we said, the woman's right to privacy against the state's rights to regulate. However, it also opened up the door for the personhood amendments when it very explicitly stated that it was not going to determine whether or not a fetus was a human being. It said scientists can't make that determination, and we're not going to make that determination for you. But what the court did specifically hold in Roe is that if a fetus is determined to be a human being, then abortion would be outlawed. And there you get these personhood amendments directly coming from Roe's way. So what you then see is that in many ways these amendments are trying to correct the logical fallacy of begging the question that is inherent in many of these conservative pro-life positions. That is, when they argue that abortion is murder, they are assuming that a fetus is a human being. And in Roe, the Supreme Court specifically refused to answer that question. So in many ways they're trying to go back through and let's fill in the blank that the Supreme Court left. And I think what's been very interesting for me, again, Delta State's located in the heart of the Delta of Mississippi, and my daughter and I, we both live in Memphis. But what has been interesting is so many times throughout history, the rest of the country has been able to turn to Mississippi and say, you folks down there still believe that after all these years. And this is one chance where Mississippians can turn to the rest of the country and say, you're just figuring that out? We've been heard about that for years down in rural Mississippi. So I think it's been kind of a very interesting time for Mississippi that we are actually on the cutting edge of this issue, and it has been hanging around there for a while. And it's been very interesting to see that so many things, the concerns that have been arose in Mississippi 3 years ago for these personhood amendments are now rising around throughout the rest of the country, and similar efforts are being made in other states to pass these very similar type of amendments.
Very interesting, Dr. Paulson. Dr. Stewart, what can you tell us about considering the efforts that people have been doing to get the amendments, like the one in Mississippi, to pass, or the people who are trying to get it done to begin with?
Yeah, that's a great question because, again, like I said, for a lot of people, this stuff with the Personhood Amendment, especially for a lot of the students, again, as Sally pointed out, we're in the heart of the Delta in Mississippi. For them, they thought this was the first time that this had actually occurred. But I'm from Colorado, actually, and so if one of the things that, if for those of you guys who are familiar with the personhood, this actually originated. It goes back a little bit farther than the efforts that took place in Mississippi, and actually you can go back and trace this to 2008, where we really have this Amendment 48, definition of a person initiative that's going to take place, and it's going to be really interesting, again, as a political scientist, I'm really interested in finding out who's supporting a particular policy, who's going to be against a particular policy, and then if it's passed or not passed, what are the consequences, the policy consequences of that? And as you can see here, we're going to have supporters, again, such as the Colorado for Equal Rights, the Colorado Personhood Coalition as well, too. But what's going to be very interesting here is it's really going to divide the pro-life movement, because what you can see here is that you are going to have some people who, again, you would naturally expect to be opponents to this Personhood Amendment, such as Planned Parenthood, and then, of course, the Democrats, such as Senator Mark Udall, as well, too, as well as Governor Ritter. But also, too, you're going to have people like the NRLC as well too. And so one of the other things that's going to be really interesting is that, I graduated from the University of Colorado at Boulder, and the mayor in Boulder, along with other former lawmakers, are really going to come out against 48, particularly because they're going to say that the language of the amendment that's going to be put in place is really deceptive and that it's dangerous to women's health. And again, one of the things that you want to keep in mind is that it was resoundingly defeated by the voters from 73% to 27%. And so that's going to be really important. Again, one of the things that this potential impact of this amendment would have had is that it would have made both abortion and birth control outlawed. It would have made it illegal, and we had even, remember, this is 2008, so we were in the midst of a presidential, election, and so we're going to have people like candidates like Huckabee who are going to come out and support this. And one of the things that's really going to be important here with this one is that it's going to say that a fertilized egg was a person even before it was implanted. And so that's going to be really interesting as well too. So what we're going to see is that a couple of years later, we're going to see that Missouri is also going to try to take an initiative. So what we see here is that the personhood organization, when they're not successful in one state, they will move on to another state, okay? And so they, when they're resoundingly defeated in Colorado, they move on to Missouri. And here we're going to have the Personhood Amendment as well. Again, we're going to have these affiliates of the Personhood Amendment that are going to start to pop up in Missouri that are based on the one from Colorado, and they're going to pop up in other states as well too. And again, like I said, we're going to have here an issue where this measure is actually not going to appear on the ballot. But what it is going to do is it's going to recognize the unborn from the earliest stages of life. And then what you're going to see here is that Ertelt, who's with lifenews.com, he really is going to tie the Personhood Amendment with an attempt to try to defeat President Obama. Okay, so you can see that there's a political motivation that's going on here as well too. And so for him, he's going to actually suggest that really this is not the way that we should go. He's going to argue that what we really need to do is that we need to put aside these amendments, such as the Personhood Amendments. So it's very interesting that you're going to have somebody who's pro-life who's going to be against these Personhood Amendments. And what he's actually going to argue is that the goal really should be to get a pro-life president in office. And again, it's going to divide the supporters on the pro-life issue because, again, like I said, we're going to have the Roman Catholic bishops here who are going to say, what's the issue here? Because an unborn child is already a person, according to them, under Missouri law. And they're going to also say, as a result, our goal should not be to concentrate really on these Personhood Amendments, but it should be to reduce the number of abortions that are taking place in the state. Okay, so that's going to be really critical. That's going to happen. And again, like I said, we're going to go from 2008 in Colorado. It's not going to be able to appear on the ballot in Missouri, and so Personhood as an organization is going to try again. And they're going to come back to Colorado. Again, if at first you don't succeed, try again, right? So in 2010, they're going to come back with what now is called Amendment 62, and this is going to apply the term person to the Constitution in Colorado. And again, you can see that we've got supporters here, obviously Personhood USA, as well as the Colorado Right for Life. And one of the things, a couple of things that you want to keep in mind is that if they put the word person in the Constitution in Colorado, it does really three things. It provides that person, okay, inalienable rights. It provides them equality of justice, and it accords them due process under the law. Okay, and so you can see how that's going to be a little problematic, and I think Sally's going to talk about that a little bit from the legal perspective. But what's important here that is really to keep in mind how this is distinct from their efforts in 2008, which failed, is that here in 2010 they're going to say, according to this new amendment, every human being from the beginning of biological development will be considered a person. And this new language will now account for asexual reproduction. So that takes, it out of the normal type of reproduction. So that's also going to be important as well too. The other thing is, again, looking at this from a political science perspective, again, one of the things that they're going to learn their lesson from 2008 is that they need better funding. So they're going to find better funding. They're also going to try to tighten up the language, the wording and things like that as well too. So they're going to actually come out with spokespersons from the pro-life movement. And in fact, one of the interesting things that they did is they ran a radio ad where they actually had a fictitious slave, okay, who was going to compare the rights of fetuses to the American slaves. And this fictitious slave, known as George, is going to ask voters to remember that unborn children are persons, not property. So again, there's this link going back to that. And you can see the racial overtones that has with this, as well as the other undertones that are going on with this particular issue. And as a result, the opponents are going to say, if this passes in Colorado, in this second effort, that it's going to ban abortion, and even if it endangers the life of the woman, okay? And so for them, they're going to say this is just simply bad policy. This will be, bad law, and it will be bad medicine, okay? And so it's important to kind of keep that in mind. But The most important thing that you want to keep down on the bottom is that, again, for a second time in Colorado, almost the same amount, it's resoundingly defeated, 70% to 30%. So now personhood amendment is going to now move on to another state, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But again, one of the things that you want to keep in mind is that there's this, crafting of the language. Again, at what point do we, consider a person? And then you want to think about the legal ramifications, the political ramifications of that as well.
Again, very interesting. Now, Dr. Paulson, from a language standpoint, can you tell us what is so important about the change from a label from fetus to person?
Again, you seem to accept that thing of a rose is a rose by any other name. But, however, for people who are interested in language, we are very much interested in the power of language, either to create or to shape reality. And that power is probably the well-known Shapiro-Whorf hypothesis, of which there are two versions. We have one, the strong version, where humans are basically caught in a prison house of language and there is no reality outside of language. But that is pretty much not totally accepted because obviously, for example, the word computer, there were not computers, so how do we come up with computers? So somewhere it seems like it denies humans' ability for creativity and imagination, and that we can come up with something and then come up with a name for it. However, there is the weaker version, whereas reality is greatly shaped by our language, and that we inherit a language system, and within that language system is the ability to classify, to clarify, and to name, and that greatly shapes reality. So that change of language from a fetus to a human being to an unborn child is basically a change in reality, and therefore it has a lot of implications. So again, we very much are greatly interested in the term that we use to name something.
Well, that helps me understand why you humans are able to change what is and is not just every other minute, not caring for what it does to my self-concept. No matter, right now we are concerned with how the situation and the change in language could affect a pregnant woman's situation.
Well, there again, the words used to describe that bundle of cells that a woman carries around inside her fetus, again, it's very varied. We have things from fetus, person, unborn child. When you read the literature, there's probably about 5 or 6 more. And so just what is it that we're talking about? So the question becomes, what will the legal ramifications be if we change the name from fetus to a human being?
Yes, what would those be, pray tell?
Well, again, I think based on the research that I've done, it goes straight back to Roe versus Wade. And I think the key basis of that reclassification, the key goal, would be to outlaw abortion. There's just no doubt about it. Roe set it up, and that's what they've tried to do. And again, as we said, that would be true in the case even where a mother's health is at risk, or in the case of rape.
Well, and that very much leads us to a change in scenery. And allow me to set the stage. It is time for us now to meet Susan, for obviously such results would be quite controversial. We will be going into detail about a little case called the State versus Susan. Now let us hear just about how Susan, seen here, actually got pregnant.
He held a knife right here, right on my neck. He wouldn't even look away from me the entire time. I couldn't look away. And even though I wanted to fight, he pressed the blade up time and time again up against my skin. I knew that he wanted to slit my throat because it would have been better than what had happened. I had no idea how long he raped me. But I will never forget that look on his face as he robbed me of my virginity. I went to the police as soon as I got away and I reported it. But all they just did all the tests and confirmed that I was raped. Okay, plus they arrested the man that did it, but I was never able to remember his name, nor do I really want to, but somehow he got off. Okay, I have no idea why or how it happened, but he did. And worse yet, for the next month or so, he kept sending me emails saying how he was free every day And there was no justice for me. I just wanted to kill myself. I just wanted to die.
Now, Jess, what effects would the view of fetus as a human bring on the relationship between woman and unborn child? Dr. Paulson?
Well, again, in Roe, you have a balance between a mother's right to privacy and a state's right to regulate for the public good without undue burden. All important, Roe never says anything about the fetus's own rights. It's merely about the state's rights, again, for the future generation. Obviously, if there's no generation from now, there's no longer a state, and so the state has an interest in the next generation. But it says nothing about the fetus's own right. The Personhood Amendments, however, would pretty much totally subsume a woman's rights to the rights of her child. Again, they're totally subservient to the unborn child, and therefore they would deny the mother's own personhood. And you have to ask, the question arises then, would every aspect of a pregnant woman's life be able to be regulated? As I find out more about, again, on the basis of bettering of protecting an innocent life, could the state now regulate, what a woman eats, how much she exercises, how much she sleeps? Would it pretty much be able to regulate everything? Because all of her rights are now subsumed to that unborn child.
Again, I can see how that would be highly controversial. Now let's take a closer look at Susan's situation, for as you saw in the rendering, she is right now in prison and is facing a first-degree murder charge. But her story started 4 months ago. She lost control of her car when she was driving down a deserted road and hit a tree in a head-on collision. Fortunately, she was able to survive while some passing motorists saw the accident and were able to get her to the hospital. However, Susan miscarried. An investigation was immediately launched that led to the conclusion that Susan lost control of her car because of reckless driving. And the doctors at the hospital determined that the reason she miscarried was due to the accident. Hoping to make an example of her, those who worked to get the Personhood Amendment passed had her arrested and are now charging her with first-degree murder. The media portrayed her as a horrible person who was more concerned about fun than the life that was growing inside her. This view is fully supported by the prosecuting attorney, Janet.
Ladies and gentlemen of the court, young women like Susan needs to realize that times have changed. She needs to realize that she needs to take responsibility, and that anything else that she would do would be less than a crime. So again, like I said, she should have learned her lesson.
And now the interactive part of the presentation. Please make horrible, hateful noises about Susan. Come on, everyone. Boo! Yeah.
Slay.
Thank you. All right, Susan spent the past few months in yes. Susan spent the last few months in jail. She is now the most hated woman in America, being depicted every day in newspapers and throughout the country more like a comic book supervillain than an actual human being. No one was willing to represent her until one lawyer named James Dawson heard about her plight. James?
What happened to that poor girl is wrong. Everyone keeps talking about the fetus, but no one is talking about the terrible turmoil that Susan is going through. And on the opinion, this all happened because of an accident. And on the opinion of just one doctor, she is being demonized. I will represent her, and I will do so for free.
Good job, James! Or you see, James is one of those who tried to prevent the passing of the Personhood Amendment altogether. But whether or not he has taken the case in hopes to actually attack the amendment itself is hotly debated amongst the media. Today started the court case that could very much change the minds of the people in America about personhood laws. But I have a question: if anyone truly cares about the justice of the situation. So much that various factions are just using Susan to advance their own agendas. In any case, is this truly a situation where I cannot see? Janet, please make your case to the court.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're here today to enforce the law. Nothing more, nothing less. Okay? The personhood statute is to protect the children of the next generation and allow them to be born safely. And it is the duty of every pregnant woman to think about her baby first and everything else second. Susan and her recklessness is the reason why her baby's not here. She killed her baby. And there is no doubt that there are other such young women who need to learn their actions can directly cause the deaths of these unborn children. For the sake of the lives of these precious lives, this law will ensure, I wish for you to make an example of Susan Justice to show how the American justice system will enforce the Personhood Amendment.
James, will you make your opening statement to the court?
Dear people of both the jury and the courtroom, my client cannot truly be held liable for what happened to the fetus. Women may often miscarry at this point of time in their pregnancy, and it is simply the body doing what is natural in order to get rid of itself and an entity that may not survive anyway. What does this deny for any charge of first-degree murder? Intent. Susan did not intend to kill her child. She cannot be found guilty of murder. So therefore, rather than the state acknowledging her body was simply doing what it needed to do, on the word of one doctor, who is neither a trauma surgeon nor a gynecologist, Susan is being charged with murdering her child. I beg you, rather than viewing Susan as the embodiment of all that is horrible in the world, knowing what is true, I request, will you all please look at her as a human being?
And I would like it note that her situation about actually being raped comes much later, and at this time, no one really knows about that part of her story yet. Shame, shame. Obviously, this is the situation for one woman is extremely dire. A question I have is how this personhood stuff, does it have even broader effects on society at large beyond a pregnant woman and her fetus?
Well, I can think of at least one. It will change a very significant standard. In Roe, the Supreme Court established a viability standard and basically said once the fetus was viable, then at that point the state's interest might overtake the woman's. That's why the state was able to outlaw late-term abortions, though it was not able to outlaw abortion in general. What the Personhood Amendment would be to change it to a potentiality standard, and that is something totally different. Again, when you start talking about, the question becomes, when does the potential for life begin? After all, a woman is born with all the eggs she is ever going to have. So as a woman, from the time she is born until she goes through the big change later on in her life, nothing more but an incubator for a future child, and therefore will the state have absolute control over everything that she does with her life. I think that is the key question that I think these personhood amendments arise here. How much control can the state ever have over a woman from the moment she is born until she goes through menopause?
This could be an interesting dilemma. As a matter of fact, I think it could even play into the next story that is in this production. There's a room next to this one, a group of, mostly men of course, are trying to write a new amendment that will say that the human egg is a person. Thinking that such a thing would ensure healthy babies. However, a woman by the name of Misty, who was one of the individuals who tried to stop personhood from passing, is determined to make sure this new amendment won't get past the drafting stage. Hence, she has gotten several women together in a group, and let's see on that plans. But first, a change the scenery. Now let us begin with the head person who is drafting this, a man named Alex.
Hey, give me 5, Justice. Alright, everyone, we just finished writing the most important amendment in American history. With the Personhood Amendments, we can rid all of America of abortions and thus ensure that women would do what they must do to ensure that life has been charged with bringing life into this world, that it's healthy and devoid of all nasty disorders caused by women doing nasty things when they're pregnant. However, we've been able to stop altogether their immoral behavior among these expectant mothers. And hence, we have a long way to go before women in America are all fit for the duty of motherhood, because not all women are fit to be mothers, right? We need to have even stricter laws for that to happen, but we'll take care of that too. We have now taken the first step toward that by writing and proposing for Senate debate a law that declares the eggs inside every woman is a person. Not only will this new law help achieve a new age in American motherhood, but it'll also prevent any couple from using sperm banks or surrogate mothers to get a child.
And get ready, everyone. You guys now get to play along with us. All ladies, we are murderers! House arrested!
People, we're not dealing with criminal law, but we can call the cops if you want us to. By the way, who did you all just kill, and why are you confessing your crime to us?
All right, ladies, all together now. We are all on our period, and our heads are bleeding. And the egg is a person, and we are murderers!
Look, wait a minute. I don't want to hear anything about this. The American legislative system doesn't care about how your female parts work.
You are trying to make a law that is all about female parts, in particular vaginas.
Look, don't say that dirty word.
Why do people get uppity every time someone says the word vagina?
Stop that. Who the hell are you people anyway?
I'll get back to that in a minute. Vagina. Vagina.
Stop it.
Vagina.
Stop it.
Stop it. By the way, I'm Misty. And let's face it, you are saying, according to this new amendment, that the egg is a person. And since every woman goes through that time of the month at some point in their lives, we have to get rid of an egg, and hence every single woman, whether she wants to or not, becomes a murderer, according to you. But since you don't really seem to understand anything about those parts, I have brought in the most asexual woman I could think of. Mother Superior, would you please?
Wait a minute, what's a nun doing here?
I am Mother Superior. Mother Superior, there is, the reason I am here, it seems to be acceptable for society to put a woman's life at risk for her unborn child. However, no one makes a man give up his kidney in order to save the child once it is born. People have no problem telling a woman what she has to do before a new life is born, but the moment the baby has left the womb, no one cares if the child will be taken care of. True, social workers will look into cases about child abuse, but only if they are reported by others. To protect a newborn life, society does not have an automatic police who police the actions of a woman after she's had a baby, but it does when the child is still in her body.
Mother Superior, you jumped the gun.
It's what we do.
Committee, if you will not listen to the information that I have presented before you, then at least give us this. Declare that the sperm is also a person and cannot be destroyed.
Hey, you can't tell me what to do with my body.
You've been telling me what I can do with mine ever since you passed personhood. Alright. Already understand Paulson? Or,
Dr. Flanagan Stewart can
Oh.
tell us about that.
oh yeah, sorry.
Yeah, for sure. There are plenty of other states where we have other ballot initiatives. So let me go back to where we initially started, which was 2011. And again, we're talking about specifically about initiative number 26. Again, like I said, there was specific language that was added to this particular amendment. Again, that life begins at the moment of fertilization, and that this would amend the Constitution in Mississippi. Now, there were supporters. At the time, we had Governor Haley Barbour, who said that even though the language was a bit ambiguous, he voted for it anyway. Our current governor, who was then Lieutenant Governor Phil Bryant, was also for Initiative 26, and even our Attorney General Jim Hood. And of course, we also had the Christian Medical and Dental Associations as well, and they ran several television ads, throughout this particular period, right before the election. And again, like I said, even though Barbour said that even though the language was ambiguous when it came to Initiative 26, he did say that he believes that life begins at conception. Now, one of the things that's really interesting here is that the American Life League actually stated that this brought up the specter of possible criminal penalties, and that there were actually personhood tours that were going on in Mississippi by missionaries of the preborn, again, to rally support for the Amendment 26. And again, like I said, on the other hand, we also have these interesting conglomeration of opponents. So for instance, while we had, for instance, the Christian Medical and Dental Associations who were for it, in contrast, we had the Medical Association, the Nurses Association, the gynecologists who were in Mississippi who were against this particular initiative. We also had, in contrast to the missionaries of the preborn who were doing these personhood tours, we also had religious leaders that were against this particular initiative. In particular, we had Bishop Gray, who was, really an important Episcopalian in Mississippi. And again, we also had the president of the Mississippi NAACP that was as well too, who highlighted that it was really interesting that they were willing to pass an initiative 26 to declare personhood, but truly ignored the fact that Mississippi still has the highest rate of teenage pregnancies and the highest infant mortality rate in the country. And so therefore, all of these opponents agreed that what was really unclear, particularly with the language, was what were going to be some of the unintended consequences. And again, like I said, what happens to this issue is Sally pointed out with wrongful death. Again, could a woman be prosecuted for that? And again, what kind of precedent does this set up as far as public policy? So again, the opponents are going to argue that this is really dangerous public policy. So again, it's not going to pass in 2011. And then we're going to get to a situation where in 2012, we're going to see that Florida and Nevada, again, personhood affiliates are going to set up shop in these two states. Again, we're going to see that, again, pro-life advocates are going to come out for it. We've got Tony Perkins, even from the Family Research Council. But then notice that, again, it's going to really split up this pro-life movement so that we're going to have people that are pro-lifers are going to really be against this, and they're going to go along with some of the other opponents like Planned Parenthood and the ACLU who are actually going to put lawsuits in place in these two states. And then at 2012, we're also going to have Montana is also going to try to put an initiative, which is going to be House Bill 490. So again, like I said, we see that other ballot initiatives start to come in even after it's defeated here, there in Mississippi.
And they're so desperate they're doing get some of these unexpected ramifications. Is there anything similar that's been going on that we could have an idea with?
Well, what's a little frightening is that in spite of all these unforeseen ramifications, we're starting to see a rise in fetal homicide laws. We're starting to see a rise in reckless endangerment laws that leave the mother potentially criminally liable for harms caused to the fetus because of her behavior. For example, in Tennessee, they just had the second woman arrested because her child was born addicted to crack cocaine. So you had the mother arrested, she took the child to the hospital, and they found the mother and they arrested her, and she's now in prison. And you can see, again, we ask if there's reasonable motivation for these laws. What is frightening is that they're being passed even when there's no hard numbers to support them, to demonstrate that they actually work. Studies show that a woman goes through an age of time of depression after she's become pregnant, and so even if she's trying to give up, trying to give up the drugs, trying to give up the alcohol, it may lead her to do those. So psychologists are saying no, rather than criminalizing this behavior, where you basically are separating a woman. What's happening, you're getting very negative consequences. One, women are not going to get the prenatal care they need because they're afraid they're going to be arrested, or they're then having a child, and then they're hauled off to prison and are being separated from the newborn child after the child is born, when the child needs them at the utmost that they can possibly have. And so you get experts who are saying, rather than criminalizing this behavior, we need to have things in place to help women with the depression to cope with the addiction, rather than simply criminalizing the behavior, because it's certainly not doing what it's intended to do, which is to help for the health of the unborn child or the newly born child.
Dr. Paulson has some very good insights. And I think Susan's own situation, which we will hear about later, actually right now, will stress this argument.
After everything that man has done to me, I just wanted to die. There I was on my way home and I saw a tree. I floored the car right into it, hoping to end my suffering. And the next thing I knew, I was in a hospital and they told me that I had miscarried. I really had no idea I was pregnant until the nurse told me. For a brief moment, I thought God had traded my life for another one by some crime so I could live a happy life. And then all of this madness happened. I'm arrested, thrown in jail, and portrayed as some monster. Really, that man has ruined my life, and I'm being punished while he's out running free. I just want it all to end. Why won't it end? I promise, I swear, I didn't know I was pregnant at the time until the nurse told me about the miscarriage. I didn't know I was pregnant. I'm telling you, I didn't know.
Well, I don't know if everyone in this courtroom believes that. Let's see what the attorneys have to say, starting with Janet. Janet?
Yes, Susan claims she did not know she was with child. However, she was 2 months pregnant. How can a woman not know that she missed her period for 2 months? The short answer is they cannot. And so we know Susan is lying.
I think James has a rebuttal.
As for Susan, not knowing that she was pregnant, she hasn't had, you can just ask her longtime gynecologist. He will tell you that Susan has never had a regular period, and that she's allergic to a chemical that's in most birth control pills, and so she doesn't have a convenient way to make her periods regular. So when you ask, would she actually not know that she was 2 months pregnant at the time of the accident, the answer is yes. And therefore, when she was depressed, both as a result of having been raped and because she was 2 months pregnant, she did try to kill herself with no knowledge that she was pregnant.
Susan is a very sad situation indeed. And as if that weren't enough, Dr. Paulson, these personal amendments could even have additional ramifications.
I think the biggest issue is going to come if we declare that an unborn fetus is a human being. The question is, what citizenship rights will that unborn child have? It's one thing if a state can bring criminal charges against the mother and put the mother in jail. The next issue becomes, and there you have a burden of proof which is beyond reasonable doubt, what is it going to be if the child can bring civil lawsuits against the mother? So not only will the mother be thrown into jail, but she could be bankrupted as well. And then you only need a preponderance of the evidence. So the question is going to become, again, what's going to happen if the child finds out, as we learn more about life in the womb, and the child comes out and says, Mommy, if you had exercised regularly, if you had taken all those vitamins, I would have a 5-point higher IQ, and so I'm going to bring a lawsuit against you. What about fetal alcohol syndrome? The only way a child can get fetal alcohol syndrome is if a pregnant woman consumes alcohol while she is pregnant. So can a child sue the mother if the child is born with fetal alcohol syndrome?
Interesting. It seems to me such liability could be pretty tricky after all. Would a woman want to get pregnant if they would be at risk of being sued by the child they were going to eventually give birth to? If they did not correctly do what they were supposed to during their pregnancy? I mean, what happens to the pregnant woman's citizenship rights?
Well, that's a good question. And that's where one has to wonder if these amendments that are supposedly intended to protect the next generation will ultimately ensure there is no next generation, except for accidents and women who don't have the wherewithal to prevent pregnancy. What woman would want to undergo the liability of being pregnant? When I talk about this in my class, I have one class that has 4 guys and they're all athletes. And the one guy goes, you need to tell me my wife could get pregnant and if she slipped and had a miscarriage, she could go off to prison or I could become bankrupted. So the men are not going to want their wives to become pregnant. But one time when we talked about this in Mississippi, we just had the Carnival Cruise Line situation and I said, we start talking about what states' laws are going to hold in this situation. Will it be the state where the baby is conceived? Mississippi is a casino state. Who's going to want to spend the night in Mississippi? And there goes Mississippi's economy. Or is it going to be the state where the child is born? And we talked about you're basically going to have pregnancy cruises where the child is conceived, the mother lives, and the child is born in international waters. And you never have to worry about, the state laws of anything. Do people have a clue what's going on? And so I think that one way to resolve these issues is that we may come up with a new classification of citizenship rights, and that's going to be unborn citizens or citizens who live within their mother's womb. And we are going to limit their citizenship rights so that they can't sue the mother, or we just aren't going to have women getting pregnant.
Could such a thing really be done?
And under the state's rights to regulate for the common good, it can. We do have a Declaration of Independence that declares all people are created equal, and yet we still make lots of classifications. 21-year-olds can drink, under 21 cannot drink. 18-year-olds can vote, under 18 cannot vote. So yes, we can make a new classification of citizens, women, again, children who are unborn citizens who live within their mother's womb, and we could say you do not have the right to sue your mother for those actions which are taking place while the mother is pregnant, if we want to have a future generation.
Again, very, very interesting. So in the light of all these concerns and efforts being made to go forth type of current legislation, these Well,
I guess my final comment is maybe that while people are advocating for this amendment, think that it's going to resolve the debate over abortion. These unknown consequences, they are creating legal issues that can take years, decades to reconcile. And in the meantime, they may have unimagined effects on the health and well-being of the future generation of both the children and the women responsible for those children.
again, very interesting. And Dr. Stewart?
Okay, well, I guess in my final comment, I'll say that again, like I said, one of the things I have to give it to the Personhood USA is that they're very persistent and they're tenacious. And I like that from a political science perspective because it gives me interesting things to discuss in class. And as you can see, there are more state initiatives to come and that they've been working on. And right now on the ballot, we've got Colorado back there again. Okay, so again, now it's number 67. Again, like I said, this one is going to include unborn human beings under the definition of a person and a child in the criminal code. So again, they're being very particular about how they're trying to do this. And this particular amendment is known as the Brady Project. Again, there is a real-life Susan that this is going to be based on in Colorado, because what the supporters are going to say is that it's going to honor the memory, if you will, of an unborn child that was killed in a car accident, just like the one that we saw portrayed here. And that here, what's going to happen in Colorado is that the driver was held responsible. They pleaded guilty for vehicular homicide and assault and a DUI, but they were not prosecuted for the unborn Brady because, according to Colorado law, the fetus is part of a woman's body until the woman gives birth. And the supporters are going to say that Brady was 8 pounds and 2 ounces, therefore Brady was person, okay? And so again, the opponents are going to say, look, the problem is that this is just too similar to the previous events that went on before, and that it was obvious that this was rejected in 2008 and 2010, and what this is effectively doing, giving constitutional rights to a fertilized egg, and it's going to criminalize abortions. It's going to make women liable if they, miscarry, non-live births. And this is going to be regardless of what stage they're going to be at in their pregnancy. And so this has huge repercussions. And again, the other thing that also does not get enough discussion is it's really going to outlaw birth control as well too. So that kind of gets wrapped up in this as well. So again, like I said, we see the Personhood Initiative comes back on there. And then also too, just a couple of interesting notes that North Dakota has also dealing with this with measure number 1. And again, like I said, with North Dakota, they're going to say that the unborn has inalienable right to life, and if this passes, this would be the first state to define life at conception if it's passed. So basically what you see is that Personhood is trying to find a state that will eventually pass this along, so that, but again, they've been very unsuccessful in doing so. And again, as Dr. Paulson's already pointed out, we've got Tennessee has Amendment 1 that's already on there. But notice how, again, like I said, it's already passed, or failed to pass, to get enough signatures on the ballot with Mississippi. So that's the reason why it's not going to be on our ballot this year. And it has also failed in Ohio as well. So again, like I said, I would hope that you all would pay close attention to these 3 amendments, initiatives that are going to be taking place in Colorado, Tennessee, and North Dakota, because I know I will. Because again, like I said, they're really looking for that one state that will give them an opening. And then from there, what are going to be the implications? Who knows? So it's very, very interesting.
All I can say is, as I said before, you've had a glimpse into a world that's not your own. It could happen. And I believe that you guys all have a lot of thinking to do, and a lot of decisions to make, many major ones. The future may be different. You may find a way to make these work in a way that the playwright did not predict. You may find a way to squiggle the laws in and not have women be second-class citizens at all. Or you could make something a whole lot worse. All I will say that the future and my sanity are in your hands. And that's that. And we will now look at the adorable puppy.
That's not
All right, are there any questions?
Or any comments?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yes ma'am.
I have a question and then a comment. The question is, if you could give me a little information on why someone like Phyllis Schlafly
Yeah,
is
why is
against
she
it,
against
because I have a feeling that as they're moving forward with these, it's a matter of trying to flip those pro-life who are opposed to the amendments, and do you see an opportunity for that, and the reason would be helpful?
Yeah, that's a very good and a very interesting question. Again, like I said, again, they're looking, one of the things I think that's so interesting is just the amount of money that's being raised, with these personhood amendments. And again, like I said, what we're seeing is that often the same people who are supporting or against in one particular state will often carry through on another state as well too. So again, like I said, it's just really interesting because sometimes you have interesting bedfellows where people that you would not expect.
What would be like her argument for why she's against it?
Yeah, again, like I said, it's bewildering.
But you don't know, does she say why she's against it?
From what I've been able to see, like I said, I would have to go and do some more research on, particularly on to try to see if I can find some exact quotes from her. But again, like I said, it's surprising to see why some people are either for or against these particular issues. But again, like I said, I think the point is that again, what we have is that it's been going on again since 2008. It has not stopped. Again, we're talking about we're in the middle of the midterm elections and expect that this might come up again in 2016. And again, a lot of people, even the presidential candidates in 2008, were really writing themselves, either for or against these particular amendments. And it'll be very interesting to see how this really comes out particularly again with the next upcoming elections. But I would argue that there's some other policies that have gotten a lot more attention. I think this is really, I think, particularly the stuff with North Dakota has really been under the radar for, in contrast to some other policy issues that have gotten a lot more attention. So, for instance, a lot of candidates are already going out and mentioning that, about issues such as immigration and things like that, whereas this is really kind of flying under the radar. And the question is could it pass without anybody really noticing? And the next thing you know, we wake up and we see these headlines. And so, again, you really have to ask yourself, how does anybody really oppose or support any particular issue? Sometimes they make actual statements about these things, sometimes they don't. And again, like I said, some are very vocal about it. Some will just get financial backing about that as well.
Have pharmaceutical companies come out and made a statement? Because I can see where medicines that women have taken and then demonstrate that there's birth defects, then pharmaceutical companies would be both civilly and criminally liable for the drugs that they provided and affecting the fetus.
Yeah, no, that's a good question.
I don't know.
I think that.
Because I would be scared if I was a pharmacist, and I can see them wanting to set up something similar to the vaccine trust that they have and the sort of waiver of liability that they have in vaccine production for these issues as well. Because I would be, as a pharmacist, I would be terrified as a pharmacist. I would not allow drugs to be classified as safe for pregnant women. I would say all drugs are not available. And so then women would be denied access to medicines that could sustain their life or quality of life because of the implications to the fetus.
That's another thing. When you think about abortion and health of the woman, but just taking medication.
Medications. They would not, I would not certify it as safe during pregnancy.
Yeah, I think that's something we probably would need to go and do a little bit more research on
That's
as
a
well,
very
too.
good
I
point.
think that's excellent.
I just find it terrifying. I mean, I think some of the part.
You had your hand up before, so.
So I'm thinking about you're talking about if a fetus is given civil rights, civil liberties, they can like sue a parent for whatever the parent did while they were pregnant with the fetus. And so I started thinking about occasionally when women are pregnant with twins, one will like engulf the other one.
Oh, yes.
And so if both of them are considered people, is it possible then for the engulfer to be charged with like murder when it is born? And then what happens?
There's another one.
I need to write that story. I really do. I should incorporate that somehow.
I mean, because we think about what could happen to the woman, but then also like in weird cases like that, I mean, what happens to the baby?
Yeah, would that be considered like fratricide,
Yeah.
and killing of the brother? But there's even another issue too I think that's related to that particular issue. We're assuming, for instance, that the fetus that is in the mother is actually the biological mother. But I teach globalization, and one of the issues I've been talking about in my globalization class is that people are searching for surrogates, and they're going to other countries. So if a woman who's in Mexico or a woman who's in India is eating, I don't know, things that we normally may not eat here in the United States, and somehow she miscarries, is she now liable? Again, how far will we take this? Again, like I said, as far as liability. And so that brings up interesting issues as well too. So again, what happens to the surrogate mother? Will she be held liable? Because again, this amount of surrogacy that's happened, some countries they don't allow it at all. Other countries they actively encourage it. In Mexico or two that have been doing so, and they benefited greatly. So if something like this was to happen, where a child who may have been born, say with some kind of genetic defect or something like that, could the child and the parents who had a contract with this woman now come and sue her and say, well, there was something that you did, there was something that you ate, or that you didn't do or eat, then we can sue you, and it brings up all kinds of repercussions.
Is personhood, is it always focused on like the fertilized egg? Because historically in the West, the idea of person had a variable time. You ensoulment at various times. But is it all?
Quickening,
Is it all focused now on the fertilized egg because that?
Well,
is
that was
final?
one of the larger articles, they had very lengthy discussion of the history of personhood.
Yes,
That's
yeah.
kind of what Justice was trying to say, you guys keep changing this thing of person, what is a person and not a person at all times.
Yeah.
And the quickening was a big thing, and when the soul, a lot of these personhood amendments now are going to say, and then there's the issue, is it the fertilization, or then is it the embedment within the womb? And now they are pretty much trying to say it's from the moment of fertilization.
Because that is more of a definable moment.
Yeah.
But for so many centuries, a boy became a person at 40 days and a girl became a person at 80 days. I mean, there was a gender difference in when a fetus became a person. So it's just like, oh, it's just lovely.
Oh gosh, and ectopic pregnancies, fallopian tube pregnancies.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's your body willingly killing it. I'm sorry, but
Because we have ways of shutting that stuff down.
Yes. Yes, we do. And again, actually, there was a group trying to say the egg was a person. So that whole bit, I based it on a real guy I heard of, and then they made fun of it. And Jon Stewart in the Daily Show, they were making fun of him, and I just saw this and I just went, "Are they really? Is that guy really that stupid?" Or
yeah. I have a question about a term you use just to learn a new term. I don't understand I've never heard medical cannibalism before.
Yeah, that's right.
So can you explain that to me a little?
Yeah, Sally, can you explain
Well,
that?
I don't know, because I hadn't heard it either until you used that.
Okay, well, the medical cannibalism, I think, is very akin to what you were in the back were talking about. Again, like I said, when the body will just kind of, again, as she mentioned, where you have a situation with the twins where, again, for whatever biological reason, the other twin will, in essence, feed off of the other one. So again, it's a relatively interesting term, but again, like I said, it's something that's been in the literature about this particular issue.
So at one point I was pregnant for about 6 to 8 weeks and then the fetus was just gone. Just gone.
Wait, there's
So
something.
that would be a situation of that, right?
Yeah.
Sue you.
yeah, you raised your hand a few times. So like,
Yeah, I have a question. I mean, apart from the fact of trying to redefine personhood, is anyone even considering how would they provide for women to have healthy diets? Considering,
No.
Right, right, we're like fixing our society.
Yeah.
No.
Why don't they put the money into poverty?
Yeah, this is
No one's
necessary.
environmental
They don't-
toxins.
Yeah.
They just care.
All this
They
money.
just want to say it's a
all this
person,
money
and if
we go
anything goes
find.
wrong, they want to blame the person who had the kid. They don't want to blame all the other stuff.
Yeah.
Right, no, that's why I was mentioning that it's ironic here that we're talking about, like, and just talking about Mississippi, there seems to be a lot of focus on what's happening to this child before it's born, but there's a neglect after the child is born. So again, like I said, we have some of the highest teenage pregnancy rates. Again, like I said, we're talking about the area that we're living in is one of the poorest in the country. And again, like I said, as far as like women having access to healthy food and things like that, we live in a food desert. We're literally in a food desert in the Delta. So if you are a woman who has the intent to be able to feed your child healthy food, the amount of access that you would have to certain things is not going to be the same as in Colorado. So again, like I said, that is really an interesting question as well too, because a lot of focus seems to be on what's going on before the birth of the child, and not enough focus after the child is born. And again, like I said, there's really, I think, a glaring neglect to what happens to those children once they're born. Again, like I said, it's just kind of ironic that this is kind of happening.
Yeah, and you've had your hand up for a while and haven't really said anything, so go ahead.
Is there, I'm interested in the ways that state could be liable, and if we really are saying that conception or fertilization is the moment of personhood, this would mean that undocumented people in our country would have U.S. citizens inside of them. And if they're put in an INS detention facility, for example, at what point can the unborn child sue the state for neglecting their house, in essence? You could really open...
That is, and I can guarantee you none of them have thought of it. They don't think about it.
I I would agree. I don't think a lot of them have really thought about that. You know, again, what we're talking about, a situation like
Before
that.
they could deport a woman, they would have to check and see if she's pregnant, because again, a child born in the United States is an American
Yeah, and I'm
citizen.
guessing that a lot of pro-pregnancy, not pro-immigration, should send them a letter.
We don't want that.
Because they're, you know,
They could deport mommy.
right, because a lot of these people who are for these personhood amendments are the same people that would argue that these women are really creating what we call anchor babies. That they get on the airplane when they know that they're 8.5 months pregnant, that they cross through the desert, you know, when they're 8.5 months pregnant, just so that the first thing that they do when they cross over the line or land at the airport is plop, have a baby. Because they're claiming that these women know that when they have the baby, not only will this child be a U.S. citizen, but that will guarantee them certain benefits as a U.S. citizen. So for instance, you know, when we're talking about access to healthy food, now this child can have access to the Women, Infant, and Children's program. So for instance, they can get coupons and things like that to be able to get healthy foods. Whereas if this was an undocumented child that they brought along with them, or if the child came over on their own, that child may not necessarily be able to have access to some of those benefits. But I doubt that. Now that's a really interesting way to kind of look at immigration and this issue as well too, because again, like I said, there's been, I think, more emphasis and attention on the undocumented children here in this instance, but very little, as you rightly pointed out, on, you know, the impact of what possibly could be, you know, again, this particular issue. So again, that's something, I think that's something we're also going to need to look into as well.
What about the trauma for this woman? I mean, I'm sitting back here, I was practically in tears, you did such a good job. That the multiple levels of trauma that she's been put through, being raped, and even women who find out sometimes that they're pregnant and didn't know they're pregnant and they lost, have trauma from that.
Yes.
And then to be used as this target. And I had a couple thoughts going through my head, like, how can, if as an organization OSCLG wants to do this, but like how could, if we wanted to, be a little more informed? Like, because I can't watch everything and be knowing everything that's going on. I think I just recently heard, like as I was waking up on NPR, I heard something about, like it was like the end of the segment, and they said, so essentially women who miscarry might have to go to the police and say, so it must have been what you're talking about, and have to say to the police, yes, I miscarried. Like you have to turn yourself in for miscarrying. And there's so many layers of how that bothers me right now, because my research is in this, and now I'm really scared too though, because I'm afraid that the work I'm doing to honor women's choice of how they define it, so a lot of women do define it as a baby when they lose it, and it's a trauma that they lose, and so I'm trying to work on communication around that for the woman to like heal with grief, like in a positive way. And I'm pro-choice, so like the last thing I want to do is have these people get a hold of my research and spin it into, well, these women are calling it a baby, so it's a baby. And so, and I know that like some of the research that I've read about disenfranchised loss is this is exactly why most people won't want to do this work, because if you're pro-choice, you're afraid that the abortion, you know, anti-abortion people are going to get a hold of it or whatever. And so I'm sitting here going, oh my God, I don't think, maybe I haven't finished my dissertation for a reason. Maybe I'm gonna change it. Like I'm just so terrified that the wrong people will spin my words. So
the wrong people tend to spin a lot of things the wrong way.
Anyway.
Like I love how everyone always likes to quote, like the religious fundamentalists always like to quote Leviticus. Well, Leviticus also says that you can't wear fabric that has more than one fabric woven in it, and that all men must have beards. You know, there are
stoned adulterers.
Yes,
I live in New York City. We wouldn't have any paper.
I know, there's all this stuff that people just. The thing is, a lot of people are making these laws that as I see it anyway. Because the thing is, I wrote this and I did think about, because I met women who have miscarried. And I've fortunately not met anyone who has ever raped or admitted it, but I've had friends who have miscarried and they just are so traumatized. And I just kind of go, what do you say about that? And if these kind of laws do pass, and the thing is, these are the kind of people who would make examples of an innocent person, which is why I kind of made Susan such an innocent person. and I did not really do it to take advantage of anything, but she's one of those people who, yeah, because everyone always, in these big cases, likes to find one thing to latch onto. Like, for instance, I can't remember the gay guy who was murdered in Texas. Everyone immediately clamored onto him as a thing about gay rights and bullying, while not really caring about who he was as a person. Those kind of things kind of seem to die away. Anytime something big like this happens, they find a person to latch onto, to the point they lose their humanity and either become all that is evil or all that is good. There's no middle ground.
Yeah.
Well, it's sort of similar with like the Ray Rice, Janae Rice thing. That video was released and it became more about abuse and domestic abuse and less about Janae Rice. Like,
yes.
You know what I mean? So it's like we sort of have a way of making a spectacle out of these things, and then that has severe ramifications, I would say, for the people involved.
Yes, and I will be honest, that kind of stuff does make me sick to the pit of my stomach, because it is my personal belief that you should always see a human being as a human being, flaws and good both, and try not to make them into a demon or a saint. I mean, and that is why I wrote Susan the way I wrote her, because that is what, in my mind, what someone who would be like that would be if they were alive. Because a lot of these times when the person's dead, what if the person's alive? They sit there and go, I have no idea what the heck's going on.
Yeah, I think the fact that she woke up in the hospital and they just charged her, and she's going, I didn't even know I was pregnant, what's going on? They're just charging you with this. And,
Well, how often do women miscarriage at 5 weeks? So you would be pregnant and not even know.
Yeah.
Yes.
So would we be necessary to test every month or on a weekly basis, like in the Handmaid's Tale?
Yeah.
So that we
Right.
make sure that we know when we are pregnant or not pregnant on a continual basis.
But also pregnancy tests show pregnant when you do have the blighted ovum issues, which that language is awful, but
Right.
because it puts the blame on the ovum. But that, it's not actually, it didn't correctly come together.
Right.
And then you have people, with empty yolk sacs, so there's no baby inside, but they
Right.
show that they
The
HCL, the
elevated
blood
level.
level's going up. So it's like, if they really want to start messing with these kind of laws, they should really know what they're talking about.
Yeah, but
And they don't.
Because they don't know anything.
Yeah, but somebody correct me if I'm wrong, is it a Minority Report where they go and arrest people before they commit a crime?
Yeah, it's Minority
And
Report.
again, like I said, you could, if you take this to its logical conclusion, if we know that there are some women who have a genetic predisposition
Yeah.
to miscarry,
Yeah.
then are we going to go and then arrest those women because then they would become murderers? And then what does that do to our, so there's a very interesting criminal, law perspective, and what does this do to our penal system as well, too?
Well, there's also sperm that it would be defective and would be
Right,
liable to
right.
generate.
And
It
notice
is why
that
I
it's the
put
women who are getting
that's why I
involved.
said that the
love
sperm
that.
needs to be a person, because the thing is, in my eyes, they're going to do one, they have to do the other, and there's actually parts I couldn't really put in due to time of her going, no, because the guys will be second class citizens, because let's face it, a woman won't just be a woman, she'll be roughly 1,000 people, so you have to take account of every single one of those 1,000 people. So women are going to be first in hospitals. If there are 10 women and one guy who are in a horrible car accident and they all need immediately surgery, the women are going to get first priority and the guy is going to die.
Yeah.
And it's very much comedy. That one is very much comedy of the absurd.
I just want to spin out one other,
go ahead.
but one other more likely, maybe, post-birth, where they are persons. But I was thinking about this when you're talking about the fetal alcohol syndrome, could a kid sue? And, we have now a culture of total motherhood and of, it's the mother, the mother needs to avoid all risks, and if you're not breastfeeding, if you're not doing this, what are the possible implications of that kid suing, I didn't get into Harvard because you didn't breastfeed me? So I think that's not just about personhood, that's about how we see motherhood, how we see responsibility for a child, a fetus in the room, but also outside, and that can be just as scary because they are already persons.
Actually, there really was a lawsuit where two twins, I think, they were brother and sister, sued their parents for making them have bedtimes, not buying them toys whenever they wanted, not letting them go to the schools they wanted. So more or less they arrested them for being their parents and doing
Yeah.
what you're supposed to do to be a good
But
parent.
actually, I mean, there's just such,
There
there's
are
there's
people that-
scientific stuff now, you know, and I know there's lots of,
Yeah.
but I think, you know,
It could get
the
very
bedtime,
confusing.
you know, maybe that's absurd, but there's lots of things you could say, you know,
You didn't feed me
you
right,
didn't,
give
you
me
know,
the amount of
yeah,
exercise I
Or
need.
yeah,
Right.
food and
But it
Yeah.
criminalizes motherhood to a certain
Yeah.
extent because what
Yeah.
we're not talking about here, and I think there's the one line that Anna had in there where, you know, don't talk about my body when I was playing Alex, is that there's nothing that's said here about the father and the responsibilities that
Right.
the father have, and perhaps, you know, maybe the child ending up with potential genetic problems after the birth, or having difficulties, you know, while during its development in the womb. And so again, like I said, it's just this attack on mothers and a motherhood, and you know, neglecting totally the fact that there are men that are involved in this process too.
And actually, the Mother Superior character is based on a real nun who wrote to the Pope, and you can tell the rest of the story. You're the
Well,
one
that
who
very
told
same
me.
question said, you know, why, if a mother is totally responsible for and she can put her health at risk, why once the baby's born, and the only way the baby is got a defective kidney, and the only way the baby can live is if the father donates his kidney, why isn't he forced to donate the kidney? And the Pope never wrote back. And so she became pro-choice. You know, and she said, you know, the Pope could never responded to me, and never made. So a woman can put her life at risk, but we can't ask the father to do the same
or
thing.
require.
Or required,
yeah.
but it is.
Which Pope was it?
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Oh,
It wasn't this one. It couldn't have been this guy.
No,
It wasn't this guy.
But she was a little bit older, so she was in her 60s or 70s.
Okay.
But so she'd been proactive, you know, she'd been pro-choice for a long time. And that was the issue. She said, well, nobody never responded to it.
It's wonderful.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
As I said, this is one time in Mississippi, may have gotten it right. Right, but it may
Well,
have
but
been
there's,
corrected
the
by-
vote's on the ballot.
It had so far.
I'm so good to see you.
It is almost.
Oh, good.
How was your voice?
Yes.
Exactly.
Be real
They could use it. They were really And you all enjoyed it. Thank you very much. You guys were actually the second audience I had some dialogue with, so.
Very good. Thank you.
No problem.
It's spinning out.
Yes.
But I
And don't forget